interesting about this prayer is that this prayer, in a lot of ways, is designed exactly the way the Ten Commandments are designed. Remember when God had delivered the children of Israel from the land of Egypt, and they were out in the wilderness, and Moses went up on Mount Sinai, and God self-revealed himself to Moses for the people, and God gave them what we call the Ten Commandments. They were 10 specific things that were written with his very finger on tablets of stone. When Moses came down, we find that there are 2 tablets of the law. The first tablet has the first 4 commandments, and then the second tablet has the remaining 6. And the order of them is the first 4 commandments deal solely with who God is. And then the remaining 6 commandments deal with how men should relate to one another. It begins with God and then it moves to mankind. Jesus, when they asked Jesus what the greatest commandment was, Jesus did the same thing. He said, the first great commandment is that you love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind. And your second is like it, that you should love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus, in line with Moses and here in this prayer, reminds us that it all begins and ends with God. All of interpersonal relationships and the struggles that people have with one another all stem from a problem between a person and God, not interpersonally. That's why no matter how much human wisdom there is, no matter how many books people read, no matter how many self-help seminars you go to, no matter how much time people spend in conflict resolution, training, until people have their relationships aligned with God, interpersonal relationships will always struggle. Always. I mean, there is more writing today on how to have better relationships with other people than there has ever been in the history of mankind, and human relationships are more fractured than they've ever been in the history of mankind. Because all of the learning, and listen, I'm grateful for the great wisdom that God has given to people through all sorts of disciplines. But the reality is that people are not fulfilled in their relationships with people. And no amount of reading, group therapy, straight-up therapy is going to change that. The one thing that will change the way we relate to one another is our relationships with God. That is the base card. And it's not about how we relate to God, it's about us understanding how God relates to us. And when we realize, you and I realize, that God has never done anything untoward towards a human being in his entire existence, as long as humans have been here, and way before that, God has never done wrong by a person. And at the same time, people have been doing wrong by God from the moment they took their first breath on this earth. But yet God sent his own Son, Jesus Christ, to walk on the earth, to live a sinless life, and to die so that people may have a right relationship with God. That's the gospel. And Jesus asked his disciples and asked the world to live in the same way, not responding in love when we receive love, but responding in love when we receive evil. The reason reconciliation is so hard to come by is because people are always expecting the other person to do it. But the gospel teaches that God is proactive in initiating reconciliation. The one who has done no wrong, seeking out the one who has wronged him. And as you and I realize that in our relationship, as we walk with God through our faith in Jesus Christ, and as we come into a knowledge of how dreadfully fallen we are and how gloriously graceful he is, then interpersonal relationships start to take on a new quality. Because now we don't expect people to get it right. We actually come expecting them to do things wrong, but when they do things wrong, we are gracious to a fault. But when you put people relating to each other interpersonally at the forefront, and you try and leave God out or put him on the back burner, you're going to get interpersonal struggle. That's what you're going to get. The old saying of mine always remains true. When you do what you do, you'll get what you get. And Jesus Christ walked and taught on the earth and died on the cross and rose again on the third day and ascended, seated in a position of honor at the right hand of God, so that you and I would always remember that God comes first. Always. And so this prayer, this model prayer here, is broken down in the same way. The first three petitions are all about God. Or he says simply, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And then the remaining three petitions deal with our needs. Give us this day our daily bread, forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. It begins with a declaration of who God is, an opportunity to praise the Almighty, the Creator and Sustainer. And from that flows our awareness of our needs. You know, it's almost, there's a part of me that just want to say, okay, I'll say that and just close this thing up. Because if each one of us walks out of here today and says, you know, God deserves his rightful place as the top of the hierarchy of how I live my life. Really, that's the ultimate truth in the Scriptures. That although, because of our fallenness, we want the place of primacy, we want the place of sovereignty, we want to sit on the throne, it is rightfully God's. I always think of that quote by A.W. Tozer. He said that in every person's heart there is a cross and a throne. And for most people, we want to leave Jesus on the cross so that we can sit on the throne. But for the Christian, we give Jesus the throne and we take the cross. And listen, no matter where you're coming from here today, if you're here and you're born again by your faith in Jesus Christ, and you're indwelt by the Holy Spirit, if you're here and you're like, I'm not really so sure about all this Jesus stuff. You're saying, I don't know if I get this. I don't know if I agree with it. If you search your heart, you will see that in your heart, indeed, there is a throne and a cross. And no matter what you believe, you want that throne. In some ways, you feel justified to keep yourself on that throne. But if you can get past your desire to be enthroned in your own heart, you will see that that throne sits in the shadow of a cross. And you will find that whether or not you agree with Jesus, that he is still there on that cross, bidding you to the place that you really